Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Reyes, and you are in for a very special webinar. Excited to bring to you in this conversation really the essential key that unlocks performance and builds a thriving team culture. I'm going to introduce you to my good friend, Tim Ohai, who is an award-winning effectiveness expert and executive coach who has worked with some of the largest businesses that you've probably heard of, as well as some of the smallest ones, to help them build high-performing teams and deliver massive wins. I came from the startup space and worked at a company that had great success on paper. Unfortunately, the culture was toxic. And as someone in senior leadership, it was really discouraging seeing great people come and go as a result of this toxic culture. Knowing what I know now after working with Tim for a few years, I'd say the insights that you're going to hear today and Tim's help would have been a massive game changer for that business. Look, I love Tim. He's become a great friend and mentor. He's been like this cheat code in my business, helping me navigate culture and getting my team on the same page so that they can thrive. But he's also, like I said, been a great friend and mentor and really wants to see me win as a human and as a leader. If you're a business leader or a founder, you need to watch this entire webinar, take notes throughout, and make sure to focus for the next 30 to 45 minutes. Tim, how are you, my friend?
Dude, it is so good to be here and to do this with you, Alejandro. I mean, mad respect for what you do in your space. It's just a joy to be able to share these principles and to have you along on the ride with me. And we'll call it in the four-wheeler as we head off road.
Yeah, I would like to say, just before we jump in, Tim, you're like the best kept secret. What you have done for businesses, what you've done for my business has really changed the game for us. And so I think the people that are watching here are in a treat. Maybe they're in a place where there's a lot of, there's some toxicity. They're maybe in middle management. They don't know where, they're stuck. I remember being stuck, not knowing where to turn, but having what I know that you're going to share today is really going to be really critical for the people that are watching today. So, like I said, for the folks watching, you're in for a treat.
Cool. Well, let's start with a really simple, just kind of a fresh start in terms of what we're talking about. What we're talking about right now is what great teams do differently. My name is Tim Ohai. I'm the founder and senior principal at Kupu Solutions. And if we haven't met yet, I just want to take a moment just to give you a very, very brief introduction. I work with a ton of companies. Yes, I've won some awards for my effectiveness efforts and thought leadership that I brought to this space. But most importantly, I help people be the best version of themselves. And specifically, that can be as an individual leader or even as an entire organization. And as was mentioned, I've worked with really, really Fortune 1 all the way through the Fortune 100 and beyond. And I've also worked with really, really small companies. I've worked with really brand new startups and folks who are just trying to figure things out. And why I mention that is because the principles we're going to share right now are scalable. They run the gamut. It doesn't matter where part of the world you're in. It doesn't matter the size or industry that your company is in. It doesn't matter if you're in a situation where you've got a massive amounts of funding or no funding. These principles actually open the door to massive wins. And let's just get right into those. So first and foremost, let's start with the idea of how these principles make a change. One of my customers, a massive retailer, had a strategy that was at one of the most important times of the year, the holiday season, and they were struggling to get a strategy to actually take root. The key was they had a really good plan. They had a really good set of objectives. They had really thought it through. They knew it was the right thing to do. Nobody was accepting it. Nobody was adopting it. And they realized it didn't matter how good the strategy was. What mattered was making sure that the strategy was implemented. And they were struggling with using these principles we're talking about now. They brought everything back on track, and that strategy surged aggressively, and success took off, and they started counting zeros as a result in their business. Another example is working with my client, Mark, and his team. Mark brought me in to work with all of his leaders to help them level their game. He wanted them to be ready for their next promotion. And the result of that experience was the best year-over-year growth for that team in a decade. Now, this is a multi-billion-dollar business, and they are used to winning. They had not seen this kind of growth. And the results of not only the best business improvement, but also it really changed his whole leadership team and his culture. And it really surfaced a change in mindset and a change in how they think and lead their teams. What's probably the most important thing to talk about is why. Why are we doing this? Why is this such an important topic? If you've been paying attention at all to the research and the data that's out there, you're going to find Gallup just this last year just produced this global workplace data study. And it shows that in North America alone, 67% of all employees are disengaged, or they're taking the coffee break approach where they show up long enough to have coffee at work and then leave at lunch and dip. And they're digging out, not because they don't want to work, but they're frustrated at work. They're stressed, and there are massive amounts of worry affecting half of the workforce in these places. In Europe, it's as high as 88% of employees are disengaged. And when you think about that, you're sitting there going, why is this going so sideways? Why is the world falling apart when it comes to how we work? And I will tell you, number one, the reason we're seeing so much struggle, we're seeing so many people who are just disengaging, we're seeing people not achieving the results they need to achieve as a business, is because people do not understand the strategy. And if they don't understand the strategy, you have to ask, what are they executing? And that's the key. That is, I'll say right off the bat, the number one reason that businesses fail is poor decision-making around that strategy. See, ideas are worth a buck. All the money's in how you execute. And so if you have a situation where people do not understand what the strategy is, then you have to wonder what it is that they're doing when they're at work. Research from Kaplan and Norton, legends in the field of business, was published in Harvard Business Review. And it said 95% of all employees either do not understand or are even aware of the company strategy. Another bit of research went to a company in Australia, and they said, look, we're going to give you a multiple choice questionnaire. You pick the company strategy from this list. 71% of the employees could not identify their company strategy on a multiple choice questionnaire. Alejandro, that blows my mind that so many people are so confused. And frankly, it's the root cause, I think, for all of this disengagement we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't understand how the onboarding, I mean, they have HR companies, they have trainers now at organizations where you come in and there's a level of onboarding. I've done it. You go for a week, you go for 2 weeks, there's some sort of training, and you're supposed to, in that time, figure out what the strategy is of the company. How does this play into, out of curiosity, how does this play into my own strategy? Because yes, there's a company strategy, but there's also my own role and goal inside of the organization. And I don't even know sometimes if I know what that is.
Well, and that's a great question. So let's break this down. Let's pause, because when you say my strategy, it's really important we're talking about who we're talking to. So this program, this presentation right now is designed for two groups of people rather. It's designed for executive leaders and founders, and it's designed for the people who work directly with them. So when we talk about what we're going to do differently, you've got to be in a position where you can actually implement these things. Anybody who works in any organization will enjoy this webinar, because we're going to talk about things that you're living on the daily. But the reality is, unless you're in a position to implement these principles, you're only going to become more frustrated, because now you know exactly what's wrong. And with that said, I want to throw out two provisos. There are two things that I think everybody has to at least respect. And that is, number one, execution will not fix a bad strategy. So how you do your execution differently is a game changer. But if you have a bad strategy, we can't help you. And secondly, number two, you and your role as a leader is both the root cause problem and the solution. So if you're in a situation where you've got leaders, maybe they're peers of yours, maybe you have a leader above you, or you've got leaders who report directly to you, if you don't get your leadership in the right place, these principles, again, won't work. But if you can address and I mean this very seriously, if you have the authority to get decisions made and to reinforce and drive those decisions through the organization, I promise you, we're going to change the game of your business, and your great team will get even greater, and your average team will suddenly surge into a level of greatness they've never even known.
Come on, that gets me excited, getting my team to win. It's not just about us as leaders to win, but we want our team to win as well.
So let's go right into this. And there's three things that I would tell you right off the bat. Number one, you got to make sure you're going to shift your mindset around execution. And I say this because when you talk to anyone around strategic execution, most people have a definition in their mind. And we're going to quickly talk about how to shift or test the mindset that your leaders and that you even yourself might have. Two, then we're going to go into how do you diagnose your root cause issue. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is how to prioritize your action, how to make sure that you know exactly what to work on when, because the last thing you want to do is get clarity around what the problem is and then waste your resources and energy trying to fix it. So let's talk about, even where I got all this stuff from. I've been in business for decades, and I've had a variety of roles of both being in the role of a global executive for big companies and also working and supporting global companies, as well as a ton of entrepreneurial work and even some charity work that I've been doing for quite a while in Africa. And I have seen things done right, and I have also seen things done wrong. I've done things right. I've done things wrong. And what we're talking about now is the culmination of those decades of experience being put in together into the best practices that really make things surge. And it hit me in my own personal experience when I was working at a company and had a conversation. The chief of staff for one of the most senior executives in the company had come to me and my boss at the time and said, I think we have some conflict. I think we have 100 things that we're about to do to the business that are going to either disrupt or massively create chaos for your business. And we're like, okay, let's talk. And as we sat and talked, we realized that there was no clarity around the prioritization of what was going to be done, who was involved, how people were going to be involved, all of those things. And it was about to become a massive firestorm for the business. And we brought in the chief customer officer, and I said, hey, I have a way of doing this. And again, in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing this with huge companies, I'm doing small companies. And I said to the chief customer officer, I said, we have a way to fix this and we can get things right on track. And she looked at me and said, I've been trying to do that for 5 years to no success. If you can figure it out, good for you. I'll believe it when I see it. It blew me away, Alejandro. Honestly, it put me back on my heels a bit, because I'm like, what? You're the chief customer officer of a huge company, very well known. How do you not know how to get your teams aligned cross-functionally? How do you not know how to bring your strategy to life through the humans that you employ? Why is it so hard? And I realized no one had ever taught her. And I started going back in my mind and realized there's so many leaders out there who have never been taught how to actually execute. If you go into Amazon right now and search strategy, you're going to find tens of thousands of hits. There's so many books out there about how to do strategy. You go to strategic execution, it drops dramatically. 95% of the hits go away. And what's there? Half of it is still heavily talking about strategy. And so I realize that there's people out there who just don't understand how to execute because they've never been taught. And that's the key. I'm tired of watching people struggle, and I'm tired of talking to leaders who are like, I cannot figure this out. I don't even know if I should stay at my company because it doesn't know how to execute.
One of the questions I have on that, Tim, is why are we so infatuated with strategy? Is it because it's busy work, not productive work? There's a dopamine hit because you wrote out a plan. Why are we so, culture eats strategy? It's like we have all these quotes about strategy, but why is it something that we don't really know how to do well?
There's two things going on. So let's go right into talking about the mindset. So why does all of these efforts, and we're talking about people who work really, really hard. I've not run into organizations where there aren't people trying to do their best work, but it's absolutely cut off at the knees from the very beginning. It's like trying to run a race with your ankles tied together. You just will not get very far. And it boils down to this idea. What does the word strategy mean? See, if I go to the dictionary and I look up the word strategy, I'm going to see that it says a plan to achieve a targeted outcome, some variation of that. And I would say in the industrial age, that was really easy. You could plan your work and work your plan and get it out there. And the mindset was, if you're not planning, you're not executing. But the reality is, and this is where a guy named Henry Mintzberg comes to play out of Montreal. He said strategy is a series of decisions that we make in order to achieve an outcome. In other words, our mindset around strategy is broken because we think I'm going to go build a plan. I'm being strategic. And Mintzberg's like, no, plans don't survive. Anybody who's ever been in business know that within 90 days, your plan is basically either being overhauled or chucked and thrown away. So the mindset needs to be, instead of going, and here's what great teams do. Instead of giving everybody a plan to execute, great teams make sure that the environment is primed for great decision making. If strategy is a decision-making discipline, so is execution. So great leaders set up a situation, they set up an environment where they know they can turn their backs, because when they turn their backs and go focus on something else, or goodness gracious, founders, you want to break, you want to go on vacation. You haven't spent any time with your family in a year and a half. You can do that because the decisions that will be made while you're gone are great decisions. So great teams and great leaders know how to do this. They know how to set up an environment of great decision-making. But again, how do you know how to do that? Everybody wants to say, oh, we just need a great culture and it just magically takes off. No, not when you get big, especially when you get big. You get any sort of size, you start adding zeros to the number of employees you have in your organization, and it just becomes completely nuts. And so because of that mindset shift that people do not understand, all the decisions that are made afterward are some form of command and control. And so it's either I have to be there making all the decisions myself, or somebody is going to redo or even undo the decisions I've made because they think that's their job. But if 95% of all employees do not understand what the strategy is, you got to wonder what those decisions are really about.
What would you say, Tim, is the root cause? And I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth here, but I just think like it's a level of, ego is the word that comes to mind about not having the ability to create that environment for others to make a decision, because as a leader, I can just get it done fast and I can make those decisions. And so what would you say the root causes of these environments not happening, these environments to make decisions while I'm gone? Where does that come from?
I learned a long time ago that in the absence of information, people create their own. See, our brains are driven to make sense of the world around us. And when we're giving information that's flat out missing or we know is wrong, we have to fill in the gap. We have to do something so that it makes sense. And because of that, we see this chaos. But the reality, now you add in ego and insecurity and other things. Now you're layering on things on top of a natural human drive with unhealthy behaviors. Now you start seeing what you mentioned at the very beginning, the toxic cultures take off. And you start seeing people do things differently. So this opens the door to, let's talk about why decision-making doesn't happen well. Let's talk about the 5 common obstacles that every organization deals with. And these are the 5 things that are keeping teams average or worse. So number 1, the most common thing people will talk about is a bad culture. It was literally, that was the first thing you led off with. When you have a bad culture, you know bad decisions are being made. And the way I define culture is really simple. I say, look, culture, your real culture is not the words on a poster on the wall. Your real company culture is the behaviors that people demonstrate in order to deliver a result.
So good.
So when things are tough, when people are stressed, people are worried, people are angry, what behaviors come to the surface? That really is your culture. And if that culture is not healthy, trust me, you're not executing. Number two, almost as commonly talked about, is a lack of accountability. We all want to work hard, but then when we hand the ball to somebody else, nothing is done the right way. And when you go try to hold somebody accountable for doing the job they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing it. So you have this accountability thing that's going off sideways, and there is no accountability. But the key here is that it's not just accountability. It's got to be, number one, trust-based accountability, not, door number two, fear-based accountability. Because if we try to shove fear-based accountability, if you don't do this, here's a consequence. You will have people hiding their work. You will have people avoiding the spotlight. And in the meantime, all that waste, all that rot is going to continue to foment underneath the surface while you're expecting to hit your number end of quarter or end of year, and nothing's actually making progress. It's actually going backwards. The third thing that we see all the time, and it's starting to get much more attention as the Gallup study that's now being talked about, is the lack of engagement. When people will not buy in, they're just not in. They're just not going to do it. And we're seeing situations where you got 67% of North America's disengaged, 88% of Europe's disengaged, and similar numbers all around the globe, from Africa to Asia to Latin America and Oceania. You're literally seeing people just check out. Like, just give me a paycheck and whatever. I can't do this work. Not because they don't want to work, but they're not willing to be squeezed. They're not willing to be pressed to empty, because they're being told you're going to have to work harder with less, which opens the door to the fourth thing. And that's a lack of empowerment. When we don't empower people, trust me, they will not make good decisions. They'll make no decision. And they'll just sit there and wait. And we are now bleeding waste in massive amounts across. I don't care what industry, what part of the world you're in, what size your organization. These are all universal truths. And then the fifth, and I would say the most important, because it's the most common, is a lack of clarity. People don't know what the priorities are. They aren't clear who's supposed to be doing what. You told me one thing, but now when I go to operationalize that, that's not what happens in this company. We're still pursuing the way we've always done it, or we're still not making the changes we're supposed to be making. And those five things become the five most important dynamics in how you diagnose what's wrong. So we talked about changing your mindset from planning to decision-making. And now to diagnose your problem, it's one of those five things. And it's, and most importantly, if you don't understand culture, accountability, engagement, empowerment, and clarity, you do not know how to create a great decision-making environment.
That's powerful. Yeah. The lack of clarity, I think, is probably the most common, as you mentioned. And lack of clarity, like, there's just no confidence. Confidence for me and my team comes from being clear on the decisions and plan that we need to execute on. And it's kind of scary to think about some of these organizations that may on paper look really successful, but you have a lot of employees disengaged, the lack of confidence, hiding their work. And like you said, that silent quitting was very, very eye-opening.
Well, and if you think about it, how many leaders do we know? And I know I've done it. You can't speak for anybody else's results. So you try to promote yours. You try to deliver something that proves, hey, I did my job. They're not doing theirs. And now we're off in a place that just doesn't help anybody. And yet that's probably so common. We could change the language on this podcast and go to anyone in the world. And it was like, yep, I 100% agree. This is a universal human behavior. And the part I would underscore here is, because of this, again, in the absence of information, people create their own. Yeah. People are redefining what success looks like and then taking their entire teams off in that direction. And so they may look like high performing, but the organization across the whole group is struggling, and they're not delivering against what they're supposed to be delivering. So let's pivot. And the last little bit I want to talk about is then, what do you do? So the most important principle now is not just understanding how to make a great decision-making environment, and not just understanding that there's 5 levers that you can pull. It's getting the sequence of those levers in the right order. And to make it really, really simple, you just simply want to reverse the order. You want to reverse the order and start with clarity.
So
then
good.
empowerment, then engagement, then accountability, and then culture. And here's why. If you start with culture, way too hard. Culture is squishy. It's complex. It's massive. It's literally a part of everything. You cannot fix culture without accountability. If there's no accountability, trust me, culture is just going to do what it's going to do. But now if we have really true trust-based accountability, your culture will naturally clean up. It'll naturally align. But again, you cannot address trust-based accountability without people fully engaged, fully bought in, fully believing that their efforts drive not only what's great for the company, but what's great for them personally. But you cannot have engagement without empowerment. I cannot get people to fully buy in and generate hope for the vision of what we're trying to accomplish without feeling I am empowered. I have what I need to be successful. My teammates have what they need to be successful. We as a company are moving in the right direction because we're given what we need. And most importantly, you cannot have empowerment without clarity. We cannot share and allocate resources to different groups if we're not all pursuing the same scope of the strategy, if we're not all pursuing the same priorities, and we don't have our goals and roles aligned. And so if I take clarity out, the rest of it falls apart. And what's probably most important here is that I diagnose where my breakdown is, and I just work myself to the highest lever, and I start there. And as I do it, as I drive clarity, it's easier to get empowerment in place. And as I get clarity and empowerment in place, now it's easier to get engagement going. And if engagement's there, now it's easier for accountability to naturally take off. And ultimately, that culture shifts and becomes the momentum, the energy needed to change the next cycle. So the next time we look for more clarity, our culture is ready for it. Our culture is poised and prepared to be phenomenal and to be everything we can. And when we do that, we watch massive results take off. You see serious performance improvements.
Okay, one last question here, Tim, is who are some of the companies that are not getting this right and not executing well?
I'm not gonna rattle off actual companies because
come
I've worked
on,
with some of
Tim.
these and their customers. So, but I will say this: there are two industries in particular that I've worked with that actually are some of the worst offenders at this. That I look at and I go, they leave money on the table because they execute so poorly, and they are pharmaceutical and tech. And the reason they are so guilty is because their innovation sells itself. So they can afford to be sloppy. And if you're in a situation where your business innovation, your product or your service is so good, people they're just cashing checks. And that the term is called resulting. It's Annie Duke, former World Series of Poker champion turned professor, talked about how people will go to Vegas and they'll gamble and they'll have a great night. They go, I must be a great gambler. The next night they'll go to Vegas and they'll lose everything that they just made the night before and then go negative. And they go, I must be a horrible gambler. And it has nothing to do with how well you play the game. All you're doing is looking at the results. And there are so many organizations that look at their results and go, they're good enough. We must be really good at execution. But as soon as you hit any sort of economic downturn, as soon as you hit any sort of disruption in the world around you, we'll find out how good you are. It's like the old saying goes, you cannot know who a good sailor is until you put him into rough waters.
So good. All right, Tim. So what do you do next? How do you go deeper with this?
That's a great question. So there's really two things that can be done. One, you can contact me directly, or you can go to this masterclass that I've just developed and made available. And what I've done is I've taken all of the best practices, and trust me, we've only scratched the surface. But these are the best practices that I use in my coaching clients to drive fantastic results. And there's a link right underneath this video that you can click on. It'll take you right to a masterclass where we take every single one of these best practices that I've just lightly touched on and more, and we put it into an easy to consume online experience. And I would just tell people, go there. You're going to find the tools you need to change your mindset, the tools you need to diagnose what's wrong, and the tools you'll need to know when and how and where to put your energy. And if you get those three things locked in, trust me, you will transform your business. You will surge from average to a level of greatness you didn't even think was possible. And when that happens, you're going to find that your team is going to suddenly light up, and it'll be fun to go to work again because they're having fun, you're having fun, and the whole game is different. So that would be the best thing to do, is go to that masterclass, or you can go to timohai.com and click on that Connect with Tim directly and set up a one-to-one conversation.
Do yourself a favor, click the link below or go to timohai.com. Tim, any closing thoughts and encouragement for the folks that are watching?
I will say this. When you figure this out, you're changing your life. This isn't just about more productivity or effectiveness at work. This is about, as we mentioned earlier, the ability to take a vacation, the ability to go into the weekend, resting and recharging and coming back Monday and hitting the game hard again because you're charged up and fired up and ready to do it. And that would be my biggest thing. If I'm going to get an emotional plea here, it's this. If you've watched this long, it's because you're in a situation where you're struggling. You're in a situation, you're on the edge of burnout, or you've actually gone past that edge. Work is hard. It's stressful. You're worried. You might even be a little angry. And you're sitting there going, this has got to be different. There has to be a better way. I'm telling you, the best practices in the program I'm offering are designed just for you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Tim, for this masterpiece to really help leaders thrive like never before. Appreciate you. And thanks for everyone for watching. Make sure to go to timohai.com or click the link below to get more information. We'll see you later.